I'm Gemma Allen with theCUBE here at the New York Stock Exchange. This is our Redpanda series for Mixture of Experts. Joining me today in studio, I have CEO of Redpanda, Alex Gallego. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. So you were here in May, back at the NYSE. I think the data's faster, traders are louder, and things are moving fastly in your world. Let's unpack that. How are you holding up?
It's been like a phenomenal summer for us, really in terms of growth from the number of customers. I think, as we'll talk later today, we're expanding the product portfolio in a meaningful way. We've been sort of really thinking deeply what's next for Redpanda, so excited to be here to share with the rest of the world today.
Great. And when you were here in May, you spoke a little bit about how you want to see the world move from batch to batch, which is no longer kind of relevant to real-time and event-to-event type of scenario, right? Tell me, what's happened since May in the space you're in? It seems as though the world of AI is moving so fast.
So I would break up the world into three big epochs. At first, there was the movement and the creation of the idea of the data warehouse, right? And so it was self-hosted data, really hard to scale, really hard to manage. You move it to the cloud, you separate compute and storage, and now you have a really cost-effective way, but most importantly, really scalable to do analytics. So part of the problem with self-hosted provisioning is that it's just hard to scale, hard to operate, really expensive, brittle, and so really the cloud gave people elasticity, gave people a way to really actually get value out of the data that they were generating. So that was data warehouse. In tabular data, separated compute and storage. The next evolution from that was this idea of the lakehouse. And so for lack of a better word, it sort of became a dumping ground, not just of tabular data, but on any kind of data, video data, music, images, things that didn't really have shape, PDFs that had to be extracted and, meaning had to be created for it, et cetera. But the idea was look, these tools are so useful that why don't we throw all our data into this one place, and then we sort of let the query engine deal with the complexity. I think we're in a new transition for the world right now that we're calling the agentic data plane transition, which is lakes are sort of stagnant. They're sort of vast and large, but they're sort of stagnant. And I think agents need this bi-directional way of communicating where they're both consuming but also contributing back information to this idea. And I think the world needs a new system. It's not just that code was generated, it's that the architecture is so different from what we were building that you really need a fresh take, if you will.
And what you described there, right? It's high impact, it's high value. We have some phenomenal guests in the Mixture of Experts series, and one thing we hear a lot is that a lot of enterprises feel that they're not still deriving the value that they expected from this world of AI, and even especially agentic AI. Tell me about some of the customers you work with, like you work with the Olympics, some very big names known to everybody.
Yeah.
Share some of those use cases.
So we grew up really powering tier 0 mission critical systems. And so examples of those is we protect whitehouse.gov through, Akamai. We power all of the electric car companies in the US. We power, probably the largest banks in the US right now. So it's likely that your paycheck is actually clear because Redpanda is up and running, or that you're able to get to work because when you tap your iPhone onto the, payment device, it went through eventually to a system that's powered by Redpanda. So that was our bread and butter. If your business depended on this messaging infrastructure to make money to function, those were the kind of businesses that we wanted to power, and they tended to be the G2K. Now, with agents, the next challenge from them is really two things around governance: access controls and observability. Are these agents accessing the data that they're supposed to access? That's one. And two, when something goes wrong, let's say that this model had a gender bias, can I go back and figure out why, this model denied my credit? How did this happen? And so you really need a different take on the architecture. So those are the next challenges that we're trying to help enterprises with.
So tell me a little bit about, what's been happening from you as a company. Earlier this year, there was rumors of a Snowflake acquisition. I know you've hired the CTO of Snowflake since, who we're going to have in later on this segment. But tell me what's been happening from an acquisition market perspective. You guys have been busy, some big announcements.
Yeah, so, I think Redpanda has always had people that basically every big business in the world has had many offers for exit. We've remained pretty focused at helping what we call the builder, makers, and doers, sort of shape the future. And so Tyler joined me from Snowflake as my new CTO, and we're super thrilled to have him. There are a few people in the world that have his level of expertise, in particular around like processing large-scale data. So first, his experience at Google building some of the largest query engines in the world, and then later on, he went on to build really large-scale systems for the next generation of querying at Snowflake for these things called dynamic tables. Those were his sort of core ideas that he brought to the world. For us, it's actually the opposite, and I think today we're just super excited to announce that we've made an acquisition of a distributed query engine, and Tyler is going to join us later today to give us like the details as to like how does this complement the Redpanda product portfolio? Like, where does this fit in the enterprise? Why was this such a critical thing? The tracing argument I can give you is that ultimately these agents need to process large scales of data. They need to filter and aggregate, and you need sort of this very specialized columnar engine to be able to give results in time to these agents that are trying to make real-time decisions.
I love it. You're staying true to the value, right? Maybe you'll be hearing the bell one day. I'm sure the guys at the NYC certainly hope so. But tell me, I think a lot of people understand Redpanda as like, a very fast-growing, very successful competitor to Kafka. Tell me a little bit about, the differentiators. Like, what is it? Is it speed? Is it cost? What do you think like really sets you apart? And when you make these acquisitions, what are you like, hunting for from a commercial perspective?
Yeah, in many ways, there's really two dimensions. We are either trying to help enterprises do more with less. I don't think you can meet a CIO. It's like, oh, I want more vendors. I want more people. I want more complexity. That's not a thing that they want to say, right? And so we started with the Kafka replacement for mission critical systems with some of the examples that I mentioned. Last year, we bought one of the largest connectivity companies in the world. It was called Bentos. We rebranded it as Redpanda Connect. And the whole thesis there is like, you need to get data to go from place A to place B and really integrate. Look, it turns out people call these systems legacy because they largely don't understand them, but that's the thing that makes the world tick. One would consider parts of the tech of the New York Stock Exchange legacy if people didn't understand it. So connectors are a way to help us bridge the old world with the new world. It's a way for us to do like, cross-database replication or extract data from like, the exchange floor and send it to Snowflake is another good example. So that's what the connectivity does. And then this recent acquisition with Oxa, which is a distributed query engine, is a way for us to make sense of all the data. Okay, once it lands in a bucket, in an iceberg table, or in like a lake, in a data lake of sorts, how do you make sense of this data? And so for us has been this like very steady evolution into becoming what we're calling this agentic data plane. I think we talked about that evolution from data warehouses into data lakes, now into this agentic data plane. And so for me, the future is very much focused on that. And the focus has been the same. How do we continue to help the global Fortune 2000s sort of tame the chaos and complexity?
And like when we think about chaos and complexity, one thing we think about a lot is compliance, right? You've kind of coined the bring your own cloud term, which I love. I think it's so smart. But, when you think about data and, bring your own cloud, you think about technology, but a lot of people actually think about trust, right? And the emotional element of that, especially in regulated industries, like some of the Fortune 200. Tell me a little bit about how you approach that, especially from a, commercial sales perspective.
Yeah, so governance it's really like the current struggle for people to adopt agentic systems, really. And largely is around two things: access controls and observability. But BYOC is something that we really need to talk a little bit more about, which is it all builds on this idea of data sovereignty. And so how does sovereignty differ from privacy? Privacy is largely a checklist. A CIO says, I need to be HIPAA compliant. And if you're a vendor, I need you to have 52 checks, making it up, because I don't know. It's actually hundreds of checks, right? But sovereignty says more. It says, I own the data. And so what happens with previous generation systems is, sure, they give you scale, sure, they give you, some security, but in a way, you gave up ownership of your data. You now send it to their walled garden, and one is very expensive, but two, you're sort of limiting your design and in the things that you can build in your enterprise because you no longer own your data, right? You're sort of paying for this service. And so BYOC brought back this idea that you own your data, you own your destiny. in the age of AI, that's really like ever present, because data is the mode. Your private data is the mode in the age of AI.
For sure. And I'm sure like for so many of these companies too, it's about, mission control, right? It's about ensuring that if you have a span of agents, they have, guarded access to certain parts of your, your infrastructure and your workflows, right? As opposed to, the risk that can happen with sprawl.
Right, it's like audited, make sure that the things that, when something did whatever, took an action, let's say, move money from account A to account B, you can actually trace it. Did the right system move the right money to the right destinations? So tracing, auditing, observability, compliance, sovereignty, confidentiality, I think those are sort of the pillars here that we're working with. And actually, the partnership with Pluralsight today that we're also super, super thrilled to announce is that we are going to market where Redpanda provides this agentic data plane that feeds the reasoning layer, right? And so in a very simple diagram, you have agents at the bottom that are taking actions. They are taking information from the trading floor and actually making a trade or sending an email or sending a notification. That's the action layer. The next layer is the data layer. I was like, okay, well, those agents need access to private data. So that's where Redpanda comes in. And the last layer is the reasoning layer. This is where you find companies like OpenAI and Anthropic. And that's what the partnership with Pluralsight is about. It's about bringing a frontier model, a company that also cares about confidentiality and privacy and BYOC. They see the world in the same way that we see it, so that you have a truly end-to-end execution. So you can go from agents to GPU execution in a full confidential way.
Well, I'm excited to chat with both Jason and Tyler. But before you go there, let's talk a little bit about you. You are a Colombian immigrant here to the US. I read that you once, as a child, loved to make dirt bikes. You consider yourself a builder. Tell me a little bit about your own leadership journey. This is a very exciting time, but I'm sure a stressful and chaotic one.
Yeah. So for me, there's been this, identity evolution. In many ways, I think the job of the CEO, it's like at every stage of the company, you're really trying to redefine who you are, like what is the best value. And frankly, you're sort of incompetent at the new job that you're doing and really competent at the previous job. And so an example, when we were super early, I didn't have a world-class marketing leader. I didn't have a world-class sales leader. I didn't have, a bunch of other functions, but I was sort of the best person at the time to do that job. And so the CEO is like it's a weird job from an identity perspective, because you're always like doing things that you're the most qualified for, but really like no one is, there's probably someone better in the world, but you kind of have to figure out, who do I hire? How do I ask those questions? And so it's this journey of my personal identity from being really good at engineering. I built the original Redpanda code base, but I didn't build the connectors. I didn't build the query engine, right? So into evolving as a leader, as a builder. And so I think my new identity is that of a builder. And as long as I feel authentically for myself that I'm continuing to build the future and I'm shaping the way that the future is built, I feel true to myself and proud of the work that I do.
We have a phrase in Ireland, a jack of all trades but a master of none, right? But as long as you're scrappy and you get it done. So, well, I think one thing you're obviously very, very good at is talent spotting. So now we're going to be joined by Tyler, who's going to join us for this next segment. So stay tuned.